Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science.
Hello and welcome to Quarantine Content with Kaggle Grandmasters, the CTDS.Show. In this episode, I interview the solo lion, Dr. Philipp Singer, for the third time on the series, and I talk about his reflections on his journey to becoming the dual Kaggle Grandmaster. Philipp has just become a competitions Grandmaster after gold medaling solo in two competitions, bringing 11 gold medals finally to his profile. Although you just need 5 to become a competition grandmaster, 1 solo and 4 gold medals. We talk about his journey on Kaggle, his reflections on this journey to becoming a grandmaster in 1.5 years, his secret to winning and his constant success on Kaggle. And we also discuss about his recent role. He's just joined the team at SEO.ai, and we discuss about what roles is he taking on here. Philipp has solo gold medal in 2 competitions that have just ended. If you've watched the previous shorter version of this episode where we talked about Jigsaw multilingual toxic comment classification, you can skip that by checking out the show notes where you can find timestamps to different parts of the interview. If you haven't, well, welcome, and we will talk about both of the competition where Philipp has gold medal, including his 8th position finish on the Jigsaw multilingual toxic comment classification, as well as his 11th position finish on the tweet sentiment extraction Kaggle competition. So I hope you're excited for that. Philipp also almost shares the secret of the secret competition Grandmaster Fight Club. So please stay tuned for that. Without further ado, here's my interview with the relentless Kaggle Grandmaster, the solo lion who cannot stop winning, who cannot stop gold medaling in Kaggle competitions, Dr. Philipp Singer, senior data scientist at SEO.ai. Please enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I'm honored to be interviewing the relentless lion, the lion from the Kaggle team Zoo, now also solo lion, Philipp Singer. Philipp, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast for the third time now.
Thank you for having me for the third time. It's an honor.
I keep sending my request to you to ask stupid questions and you keep saying yes, so it's always a privilege to talk to you.
Good to be here.
I want to start with this repeat question from the podcast. Can you confirm or deny if there's a secret fight club for competitions grandmasters?
I don't know of any secret fight club or anything. So
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay, you're not breaking the first rule.
Yeah.
So you've just made it to top 4 worldwide rankings and you just received 2 solo goals in a week span. I'd like to let that sink in for the audience for just a second. After winning 11 gold medals, do you have any interesting Kaggle memories about your journey? Looking back, any favorite stories or moments?
Well, a lot of good stories, some bad stories, a lot of stress, a lot of excitement, a lot of winning. So overall, it was a very good experience. I think now I personally started on Kaggle around 1.5 years ago. Dimitri and me started there. We told the story before, but basically we started with the Quora competition. We started to win this competition, and then the whole journey continued. Dimitri had his solo gold already, so I needed to betray the zoo now for my solo gold. But I'm very happy to have achieved that. I think overall our or my favorite memory is still the NFL competition that we won, because that was for us the most exciting competition, and it also contained maybe the most disappointing or feeling, which was this whole mess after the competition ended, with us being off the leaderboard. So that was an up and down, but in the end, this was by far the most exciting thing for me personally, and my favorite experience on Kaggle, this competition. Otherwise, meeting a lot of great people, getting into the community, learning so much new stuff. So I'm very, very happy that we decided to start doing Kaggle. It has helped me a lot professionally, also personally, and I'm very happy.
For the audience, I'd like to mention there are data scientists, then there are very smart data scientists, then there are data scientists that are in the top 100 on Kaggle on any leaderboard. If you happen to make it in the top 10, then you get a gold medal. And Philipp now has 11 gold medals on his profile, just to iterate again on that. So you've shown us that the impossible is of course possible. It takes a lot of brain power, a lot of smartness. What would you attribute your Kaggle success to?
I think having a very good broad overview of methods and what is important also to be on top on Kaggle. So I think a lot of different things come together, and nowadays you cannot be an expert or focus only on one tiny thing. And you need to be a very, I think, full stack data scientist in terms of methods, in terms of tools that you use, in terms of whatever you try. And you need to experiment a lot and also be quick with it. So I don't think there is any kind of, because people often ask, like, what is the secret to win a competition? I don't think there is a secret or anything you can teach anyone, like, if you do this, then you win a competition. It's rather, you need to be aware of many different things, and you need to be able to combine and dissect the problem and figure out what is important. So it starts with understanding how the problem is set up, what kind of validation you need to do. It then goes over to what type of method you need to use, what kind of tricks or tweaks you can try in order to improve the method. And then what has proven to be important for all the competitions recently is what type of post-processing, how can you optimize the metric. So it's kind of this full pipeline through the model building perspective that is important nowadays. And maybe a couple of years ago, you could be on top by blending and stacking whatever is possible. But nowadays, everyone is doing that. Yeah. So you need to really be aware of all the different things, and shape up a robust solution.
I would have attributed it also to your team name, but you proved us otherwise with the 2 solo goals by just using your name as the team name there.
Yeah, I'm happy that I have achieved this now solo as well. I'm still always happy to team up, specifically with Dimitri. I think if you have 2 brains or more brains, you can even push further than being solo. But of course, I'm very, very happy that I have achieved this now and have proven that I can do it also alone.
If and this is from the aim, if you were to give yourself advice, yourself from the past advice on how to approach your journey, what would you tell yourself, and how would you start your journey today? What courses, podcasts, competitions would you approach?
You mean if you are not that into the field yet? Like
if you were starting today and you were, let's say, giving yourself advice.
Okay. So when I started on Kaggle, I already had a lot of background in the field. So in general, for someone who is new to the field, I would just try to really get into it, try things out, do Kaggle competitions, do personal projects. Maybe stop doing older certificates that you can get. We live in a very, very good time in terms of information. So there is a lot of information out there. I don't think there is too much difference in terms of quality of the different information that you can consume. But you don't need to do hundreds of courses, hundreds of certificates, read thousands of books. It's a lot of hands-on experience that is necessary, and you need to be, as I said, be in touch with many different topics and many different techniques, and then I think you can really start to shine. I personally, nowadays, I get most of my value out of Kaggle in terms of new methods, new approaches. Otherwise, I read Twitter, I read Reddit, machine learning subreddit, but nothing too specific. Sometimes I listen to a podcast or check out some of the new papers, but there is only so much time you have, and yeah, reading solution posts on Kaggle can get you far by seeing what is currently kind of the main type of approaches that people use, and this rapidly changes over months already. So, and we have a good different types of competitions on Kaggle, so you can get already there a good overview.
I was hoping you'd give a shout out to Chai Time, but it looks like the podcast isn't there yet.
Well, that's not true. I actually listen sometimes to your podcast, and I have said this before. It's great that you are doing it, and you can get a lot of different insights by listening to how people work and how people explore problems and think. So I think that's another very, very valuable thing that you can, for example, get out of your podcast, or also get out from teaming with others on competitions. So everyone approaches problems a bit differently, and you need to get into this thought process of how to do these types of problem, how to approach this type of problem settings. So I really enjoy listening to different thoughts of people and different types of approaches and different beliefs also sometimes. You always need to be open how others think and how others, there is no ground truth in what is wrong and what is right. And so be open and explore things.
Definitely. We'll come back to Kaggle about your two solutions, but before that, I'd like to talk about your new role. You just joined H2O.ai a little over a month ago. Can you tell us about your role and what tasks are you taking on at H2O?
Yeah, as you said, I started in H2O now nearly three months ago. It has been a very good experience for me. I'm involved in many different types of topics, so that's a very nice thing for me personally, that I can shift also attention to different types of things. It's similar as on Kaggle, where I try to approach different types of problems, because that personally helps me to be more creative. So my role in H2O is also very diverse. I think as a Grandmaster in H2O, you try to be involved in many different things. So for me, it has been recently more into customer-facing projects. That still means that we also try to improve the product by bringing in our ideas and thoughts about what we think would be good additions to the product. So it's kind of very mixed thing. Improving the product, being involved in customer projects, bringing in general ideas, doing internal consulting, helping others. So it's a lot of different things, and it's really exciting and steady progress that you need to do.
Will you be making driverless AI as fierce as your solutions, as fierce as the Zoo's solutions on Kaggle?
I hope to. As I said, we try to bring in ideas of what we think is valuable and what can be optimized and improve the product. So definitely it's a goal that is on my mind and our mind, yeah.
Awesome. Do you see any changes? I think you've teamed up with a few Grandmasters from H2O before joining. Do you see any changes after joining, working with the Grandmaster team?
Internally in H2O, you mean?
Yes.
Not really. I mean, I knew most of them already. So it's kind of
so there is a fight club.
Yeah. maybe not a fight club, but an inner circle. No, we talk a lot. I'm always eager to learn what others do, both internally and externally, because that's an easy way to get involved in different things if you just listen to others, what they are doing. Similar to if I would listen to your podcast. So I think you have interviewed most of them already. So yeah, but no big changes in general in how you deal with others. I'm very happy to collaborate with many of them internally and sometimes also externally. Of course, internally more because we are involved in similar projects sometimes. So it's very exciting.
Okay, and this is also a repeat question. I joined a little while ago. I'm still trying to find the answer to this. What does the makers philosophy stand to you? What does it mean for you?
Well, first of all, I also have the T-shirt on, so it's a very nice statement. So you can make out of it whatever you want. You can make out of it. So I think in general, it is this philosophy that you need to get your hands dirty in order to bring things forward. I think in general, there are sometimes in big companies a lot of slow working processes, but the advantage in a maker culture is that everyone can, in theory, do everything. So don't talk for ages, just do something. Don't try to figure out things. You can often show things way better and discuss things way better with implementing prototypes, iterating quickly, putting out ideas, trying the impossible. Fail is a very important part of a maker culture, I believe. Be open to failing. So it's a lot of different things, but very fast-driven culture in producing and bringing things forward.
Great. I always keep finding amazing new insights to this answer. I think, like you said, it's an open philosophy, and everyone has their own interpretations of this. Now I'll talk about your recent 2 gold medals. I think for the audience, I'd like to mention that this will go out as 2 separate podcasts so that I have more material to release. But you medaled in 2 competitions as solo participant, and that also gold medals. How did you do it? Because both of them were running in parallel, I believe.
Mm. Yeah, both were running in parallel. It was the tweet sentiment extraction competition and Jigsaw toxic comments. I decided to focus on tweets way more. So I spent most of my time that I had time to do Kaggle on the tweet competition, but kind of started to work a bit on the side on the Jigsaw competition to have a backup in terms of my solo gold medal. In terms of time spent, I probably spent 1/10 at max on the Jigsaw that I spent on the tweet competition, even though I ended up higher even in the Jigsaw competition than in the tweet competition. Yeah, when we can talk about the details of the competitions, but in general, I think even though I did not fully do it, I think focusing on one competition can bring you more forward. But there is a lot of risk in also ending up high if you need, as I really wanted to end up in gold, solo gold in this case, then there is always a risk. You can always shake down, something can happen, something can leak. So even though the nice thing on Kaggle is that you have it mostly in your hands, it is not only in your hands, and things can happen. So that's why I decided to also focus on Jigsaw. But I tried to really focus my attention on the tweet competition and yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe start with the Jigsaw multilingual toxic comment classification. Just reading out the name for the audience if you'd like to look that up. You finished 8th on that competition. Congratulations. Can you say the challenge? It might be familiar to many because this is a familiar name. How was this different from the earlier competitions? Because I think this was a different flavor of the competition.
Yeah, there have been previous competitions. I never did any of those, so I actually don't even know much background of those. In this case, or rather, I think the difference to the previous ones was, so in general, you have data on Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, you have talk pages, which are pages where people discuss, for example, articles or changes to articles or conflicts. There is a lot going on in the background of on Wikipedia that many people don't see in the front, but there are a lot of like edit wars. There is a lot of research actually about this topic. Like you want to change this Wikipedia page to this sentence, and others say no, you're not allowed to. And then there's a whole discussion about just changing one sentence on one page. So there is a lot of community discussion and conflict going on in the background. And these talk pages are basically the pages where you have the people discuss these things. And there is a lot of toxicity also going on those pages. And the main goal of these Jigsaw competitions has been to classify these talk page comments to toxic or not toxic. And the gist and the twist in this year's competition was that they wanted to do it not for English, but for other languages. So previously it was always only focusing on English Wikipedia. And this time they wanted to focus on classifying 6 other language Wikipedias. So for example, Turkish, Italian, French, and so on. But they did not really provide any training data for these languages. So the goal was to train your model on English comments given from the past 2 competitions, and doing inference on new languages, not including English. So the goal was to train something on English where you have a lot of data, and then do inference on different languages. And you can say this is a kind of zero-shot approach where you try to predict something that you don't train on. And this was basically the goal. The other twist was that for validation, you had a small data set of 3 languages for validation, but not all the 6. So it was very important to make a solution that is robust on those 6 languages, which basically you could only check on public leaderboards that included those 6 languages.
I think another interesting thing that I've learned so many things from you, but from this competition specifically, you've shared on the forums that you trusted your gut intuition, and you eventually ended up losing 3 positions because you didn't just pick a solution that involved a public kernel. Can you share a bit of story behind that? Because I think many people just blindly copy and fork.
Yeah. I think many people still did it, and it might be still reasonable to do. I don't know, to be honest. So what happened in this competition is that unfortunately, the whole test set was available, even though it was kind of a kernel competition. So what you could do is to just add a CSV file to your kernel, load it and submit it. And it worked also on private test. And the second important thing in this competition is that blending was really, really, really important, and could boost your score a lot. So that led not only to the infamous blending and ensembling kernels that just pull up a lot of different submission CSVs, blend, and the highest scoring kernel until the end was just a blending kernel by far. And the second thing is that people, which unfortunately have observed in the past, and I personally don't like it, is publish kernels which do inference only. So they train their model externally and don't reveal the training method, but just publish the inference, which can lead to large or high scores and can net them quite some upvotes, but the complete training process is hidden. And I personally think this is bad practice, because people will never learn how those scores have been generated. and this is really, I think in general, people published really, really great kernels in these competitions, and and this is the exception, I think, overall. Regardless, my best sub included one of those kernels, and I decided not to sub it because I did not see the training, and by the rules, it's also a bit unclear if this is even allowed to use such a submission. So I ended up deciding not to use it, even though I kind of knew that I will lose maybe a couple of spots. It ended up maybe 3 spots or something.
Yeah.
But I felt better about it to not select it, and also need to be a bit like, I hope something in that respective changes in the future in what kinds of kernels are published and what kind of kernels can be used.
For the audience, you have to select 2 submissions towards the end of the competition, even though usually your submissions end up getting ranked by the public score you're getting, but you have to make sure you select the 2 ones that you hope would score best on private leaderboard. So that's what we're referring to. Can you share your CV strategies for this competition? Because you said the test set was slightly public or almost public already throughout the competition.
Yeah, there was no way to do a proper CV in this competition, and that's why I didn't like the setup too much. So you only could use, in my opinion, public leaderboard to make a judgment about the models. It was by far the most robust thing to do, because it included all 6 languages that are also in private test. It ended up being just a random split from the whole test data. So it was the most robust thing to use, and I usually would not recommend to do it, but you need to also find the competitions where this is valuable, and in this case, this was the only way to do it, in my opinion. So I did not do any local CV, just subbing and public LB.
Okay. Also, we mentioned you were competing by yourself. Did you find any differences? I think this was your first, actually, the second competition where you were just competing by yourself. Any differences in competing by yourself versus in a team?
I tried one other competition before, but just a week or 2 with Data Science Bowl. But in general, I think it's very different. It has advantages and disadvantages. I think advantages are that you are only responsible for yourself. And if you, for example, slack off a couple of days or decide to do something else, you don't need to have any bad feelings of letting someone down or not helping. I think this is a lot of pressure in teams that, at least for me personally, that I want to contribute something. And I feel responsible for contributing something, and I need to, if I want to do something else or need to focus on work or something else, it's sometimes a bit difficult for me personally, because I need to let people down. I'm not sure everyone thinks like that, but at least for me, that's the case. And if you're solo, you only have the pressure on yourself, which is also some form of pressure. And but if you decide to not do anything for a week, no one is affected by it except for yourself. So that's definitely an advantage of doing solo competitions. Disadvantage is, of course, that you are working alone and not in a team. And if you're stuck, way harder stuck than in a team. You cannot discuss things. You cannot say like any insights. I think in tweet competition, I was stuck a lot, for example, and I could not discuss with anyone and try to go out of this stucking behavior feeling. And what usually also is good in teams is that you explore different branches of the directions you can go. Like you focus on this, you focus on that. And if you're solo, you need to either explore different at the same time, or, as I said, you're stuck in one direction and then you need to go back and start with another. So I think that's definitely a problem. I think the perfect team size is 2 to 3 people. I think that is the most valuable, because too many is also then again complicating things with too many different opinions, too many things to coordinate. But yeah.
Okay. I also want to discuss your solution, but you also learned a lot about TPUs. You mentioned on the forums. Maybe you can start by what you learned about TPU specifically, and
Yes.
then towards your solution overview.
Yes, so actually my main goal in the beginning of this competition was not the sole gold medal, but it was about learning about TPUs and trying to get a kernel ready that I can easily fork and run just without too much attention. Because, yeah, as I said, I was focusing on tweets and I just wanted to get something going in the meantime for Jigsaw. So get a kernel, fork it, change a few parameters, run it, and see what happens. So I spent some time in the beginning to get this TPU kernel ready. I started with TensorFlow. I started actually with PyTorch, moved to TensorFlow, moved back to PyTorch. And I figured out it's not really stable, honestly. It's very, specifically in this competition, you needed to use one of the largest possible models, which is an XLM Roberta Large, which is really a large model. And this makes things, again, very much more difficult because the RAM on the individual cores of the TPUs is quite limited. And just moving the model there and moving the data there and then doing some things is making things hard in terms of memory usage. Sometimes kernels stop randomly. So it was kind of a struggle to get something going. I tried to engage a lot with in the end, I decided to go back to PyTorch because this is my main framework I use. Tried to engage with the developers of PyTorch and XLA, which is kind of the backend for TPUs there, improving things. So my insight here is it is very promising. It can run stuff very nicely parallel, 8 cores. So if you can run even 8 folds at the same time or split the data up to 8 cores. So it is very promising technology, but it needs more refinement on the framework side to be really stable and usable, in my opinion.
Got it. Do you think it's still flaky even with TensorFlow? Because PyTorch isn't Google's native.
Yeah,
ecosystem.
it's definitely more robust for TensorFlow, but still it was kind of shaky a bit, and the memory issues you get are also not 100% solved. It is probably better than PyTorch. PyTorch is catching up, but both are not perfect yet.
Okay. Now I'd love to hear about your solution overview. I think this also is a really nice chronology because your first win and your first competition was also an NLP one. So just trying to connect a few dots here.
Yeah, I've been doing really well in NLP competitions. My solutions in this case was, as I said, use XLM Roberta Large, train on the English data and translated training data. So the idea was to translate the English training data to other languages that you then have in tests. So for example, translate English to Spanish, to Turkish, and so on. So for one sample of English, you have six extra samples for all the other languages. Thankfully, people use the APIs that Google provide or Yandex provide and translated the data. I tried to do it myself in the beginning, but you need to have some time and of course some Kaggle people do stuff so you can use it, which was very nice. In the beginning, I also translated the test data and then blended. So for example, translate Spanish comment to English, score both, and then blend. But in the end, it was robust enough to translate only the train data, train on that, and do inference on the actual language. There was not much more, at least from the time I invested, and there might be more to get out. And others showed that there is more to get out in terms of model improvement. So it was no like fancy things really helped me. Rather a simple XML Roberta Large, which is really interestingly strong on different languages. I tried as many others to use monolingual language models. So for example, use a Camembert for French, use a Italian model for Italian only, and then only use those for the languages. But XLM Roberta Large was already doing the job, so no need, from my perspective, to do that. I think some people got a little bit out of it with blending, but the insight for me was the model as it is really strong. Train it a couple of epochs for on the translated data, blend many models, and then you're good to go. The main twist then was that the metric was AOC and it was calculated over all languages at the same time. So you had to find a global ranking. So for example, if Italian would be always higher than Spanish, you need to put Italian higher than Spanish.
Okay.
So there was a lot of potential to gain from post-processing, which is also what I focused then heavily in the last couple of weeks. So you could shift one language up or down and get quite good gains on the overall score. So for example, shift all Italian predictions up by 1.05 and you could get really good gains. I figured this out on CV, but testing it on those 3 languages that we had, but you cannot fit those scaling factors on CVE because you have 6 languages in test. So I needed to do it on public LB. Some other team, the NVIDIA team, just probed the means first and then adjusted so you can just predict one, set languages to 0 and then probe the mean, the actual toxic mean of this language, and then adjust the predictions up or down accordingly. I just directly probed or fitted the scaling factors on public LB. You had 5 subs a day. You can play with it. I started quite early, so I had some time to do it. The last 2 weeks, I basically just tried to get close to my best sub because I decided to not use, as we discussed earlier, my best sub. I couldn't fully reach it without that one model. Yeah, that was kind of the main thing, the main solution. Yeah.
How are you tracking your experience? Because Roberta takes a good amount of time to train, and I think were you just exhausting your first box that you had bought with your winning prize, or were there more? Was there more hardware involved?
Well, for this competition, I only did TPUs on Kaggle, nothing else. And subbing was easy because you could take the submission CSV and just play with the thresholds. Experiment tracking, I did not do much in this competition because actually really the most benefit was coming from post-processing, and I could track this very easily on Kaggle itself, but just using proper file names and maybe writing some things down. For the tweet competition, I did way more local tracking. So usually what I do is to do a simple Google sheet and note down things and track there. Still nothing. I think I mentioned this in one of the last interviews we did, that I want to get better in that. Still nothing more than using a simple spreadsheet and tracking results there. And yeah.
Most of the times, the simplest approach is also the best approach.
Yeah, what works, right?
Yeah. For someone now the competition has ended, but for someone who wants to explore transformers or just wants to learn about Roberta, do you think this is a good starting point for them? If they just jump on to the platform and look at your solution and try to replicate it, would that be a good approach?
Yeah, I think there are actually really good public kernels which try to do very robust CPU usage and use XML Roberta and do this zero-shot training. So I think that's a good way to start in this competition specifically. I think it can be valuable also for future competitions where TPUs might play a role again if you get familiar with how to use them in this competition. I feel like Kaggle is at least pushing a bit into this direction, so that's also why strategic-wise it might make sense to look into it. So yeah, just check out the public kernels and solutions. I think there is not too much magic in this competition, except the post-processing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not that eager of people sharing. There was not much shared. I think there was not much to share in this competition, except of course the post-processing that no one thankfully shared. So yeah, it is a nice competition to start looking into that.
Awesome. Now, I also want to talk about the other competition. I don't know how I led this. I think I'll release one before the other. But the other competition where you medaled is the Twitter sentiment analysis, tweet sentiment analysis. Congratulations also on the other gold. Again, can you help us set the stage for what was the challenge here? It was tweet sentiment extraction. This looks like a fairly straightforward problem. Sentiment extraction, you can find many blog posts on it. What was the real challenge here?
I think this was not a straightforward problem setting, actually. It was something I have not done before. It is an NLP competition. You had tweets. You knew the sentiment of the tweet. So even for test, you knew if a tweet was positive, negative, or neutral. And then you needed to extract the subtext that crowd annotators selected for this tweet. So for example, if I have a tweet that says, "Today I am happy," then this would be probably a positive sentiment, and an annotator might select happy as the positive part in this tweet, or even "I am happy" or "am happy" or whatever. So it was a competition hosted by Kaggle itself. They used the public data set of tweets, but gave it to crowd annotators to do these annotations of the subtext and probably also the sentiment. So, but in the competition, we knew the sentiment and we had to select the text. So it is still using the basic Hugging Face NLP models. In this case, the best one was a Roberta base was sufficient to use. And then you have to change the head of the model to predict the start token and the end token. And then you select the text from start to end. So this is basically a bit of a different thing to do here, and you need to optimize it a bit differently, but that was the problem setting.
What were your first go-to steps? Did you reuse your pipeline from your earlier NLP experience, or how did you approach the problem?
I have a general PyTorch pipeline that I use. There were some really good kernels in the beginning of the competition from Abhishek and Chris, who kind of laid out how to do this extraction. But in the end, it's simple. You just have two heads or two outputs, which is start token and end token. And then you do a BCE loss or something similar on those outputs. You need to play a bit with the offsets in the beginning of the tokenization, because you need to remember what kind of characters are selected originally. So it needs a little bit, or maybe even quite some work to get the whole workflow running. But that's how I started. Started from my typical typical PyTorch pipeline and used some public insights of how people approach it, and then shaped up my own solution with that. My next thing was to do, so there were some public solutions which maybe ended up, let's say, I even forgot the public scores in what range they were, but it was something like 7.716, yeah, let's say 0.716 was a public solution. And then I usually start very early to blend, or rather to bag. So because in neural networks, and specifically in this competition, there was a lot of randomness. So because there was a lot of noise, so I set up my CV setup already. So it was small data and it fitted quite quickly on my local hardware. So I did 5 folds, and what I also tried to do is to do 5 runs for each fold and bag it. So just 5 random seeds, run it 5 times, average it, and see, because this gives you way more reliable CV setup, and also simulates the public sub you do, because you average 5 folds, right, in the test. So what you do is, if you compare only 5-fold single CV to a sub on test where you average 5 models, it's unfair. The test sub should be better because you average 5 models, and on CV you only fit 1 model for each fold. So I also fit 5 models for each fold, average them, and I have a more reliable CV score. That I did that very early. And what I also usually try is to fit directly on the full data, use fixed epochs and sub it, and it gave me a little bit more boost. So I got from the, let's say, 116 public score to maybe 118, 19, whatever. This was already enough to be close to gold very early on.
Walk in the park for you.
Yeah, but this tells you, like, there is not much magic in the beginning of when people get high scores. It's sometimes just bagging, blending, and tuning the scheduler, tuning the learning rate, tuning the optimizer, tuning the batch size. Yeah, that's usually what I start. Try to get something robust there that I'm confident with, where I don't have too much variation in the test submissions. This was really hard in this competition because, as I said, much noise, a lot of randomness. And try to get a robust setting that I'm confident with. And then I try to tweak different things which are not the schedule or not those things, but rather which are either the model itself or kind of different pre-processing, post-processing, different tokenization, different model architecture, some more things outside this basic training routine. Yeah, so what was the twist in this competition? The twist were 2 things. So first of all, different crowd annotators have very different behavior in this type to select the text. So going back to my previous example, I am happy. If I would ask you, what would you select as the part?
Happy, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably happy, but you could also argue to select I am happy, the full text, right? Or if you have a tweet, I am happy, I am so awesome. Yeah. What do you select? Happy or awesome? Or
probably still happy.
both. You cannot
Maybe
select
both.
both. You need to have a continuous selection. So you can only select happy, I am awesome. Yeah. So you already can see that it is not trivial and it is not consistent with how people annotate this text. So this is, and there was a second thing, like if you have, I am happy, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Yeah. Do you select all exclamation marks or do you select one or none? So this was the inherent noise in the data. And it was important to address this noise. One step was, of course, to do a lot of bagging and blending and ensembling. The other was to also let the model learn the noise way better. So this went back to the tokenization, because in default tokenization in Roberta, what happens if you have exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, it takes it as 1 token with 3 exclamation marks. But and then the model cannot learn if 1, 2, 3 or none are selected. So what I did is to change the tokenization that it always splits on individual special characters like dots, exclamation marks, question marks, and so on. So yeah, so what I did is to adjust the tokenizer that it splits on the individual special characters, which means that it does not say 3 dots are 1 token, but rather each of these dots is 1 token. And so if you have happy ... then I would have 4 tokens, happy ... And the model can then learn how many dots are selected or not. There are other ways to do it, either through some pre-processing or some post-processing, like you can split you can just add spaces between the dots, and then the tokenizer also needs, but then you need to adjust it back, so it was more complicated. So what I did is to adjust the tokenizer itself. There is a merges file in the typical Roberta tokenizer, which says which kind of characters are combined to tokens. So for example, this has one line which says dot, dot, and dot get merged to 3 dots. And if you remove those lines, you can split the tokens up. So this was very straightforward for me, way for me to adjust for these kind of settings. And then the model learned way better this type of noise.
Okay.
So this gave me quite some significant improvements. I think I moved to something like 7 to 4 then, which was already really high and would have been top silver maybe in the end in private LP. There was another thing in this data, which was actually rather a data issue, which was that the crowd annotator company apparently did some pre-processing on the data beforehand, and then provided only the indices of the selection afterwards. So there was a whole discussion at the beginning of the competition that some of the indices are wrong, and it was because they escaped some HTML text, HTML code. So for example, if there's quad, then it's a quotation mark, and they replaced the quad with the quotation mark and provided the indices back. But Kaggle only had the quad, so the indices were shifted. Okay. They fixed that, extended the deadline for 2 weeks, and scores generally improved after they fixed this data. But they did not fix everything. So what apparently the company also did is to strip the text. So sometimes it had spaces in the beginning and in the end of the text, and they removed those spaces, and again, the indices shifted. Kaggle did not address for that. I personally had this suspicion for weeks, and I was digging a lot into the data. And my conclusion was that it was not a consistent problem in the data. So maybe there were even 2 different types of annotating companies or something that did it differently. I have no proof of that. It's just my personal feeling. I tried a lot of post-processing to address for that, but I could not find anything consistent to do it. I think my model was partly also already addressing it. But apparently this gave huge boosts to others who addressed this in post-processing or as the top solutions in the modeling. I could not find any way to address it, even though I suspected it to be the issue. So I did not do anything with that respect. My model, through the tokenization, already addressed some of it, but I did not do any post-processing in this competition. So to further improve my score, I did a lot of blending, a lot of ensembling, different types of models. I did some pseudo tagging. I did some trying to get diverse. So in the end, the main keys to my solution was this tokenization, probably the most important thing. And then a lot of blending, really a lot of blending in order to get something robust.
Okay. I also want to ask the fact that you were, I think, active across 3 competitions, the COVID one and the tweet and Jigsaw one. How did you balance across these 3? Because you mentioned these thought processes, and it's easy to get confused because all 3 were, at least 2 were NLP, and you might have been confused. How did you navigate that? How did you balance all of these?
Actually, there was also ion competition in between. The COVID competitions were rather short, and we had a good team there, so we could split things up more. The ion competition was more of a problem because specifically after teaming and what I mentioned earlier, I have kind of feeling of responsibility to do something. So actually, I tried to balance it in the beginning between ion and tweet, but then completely put tweet competition on pause, Jigsaw anyways, and focused on the ion competition. Because as I said, responsibility for the team and also with talking with them then. So for the last couple of weeks, I focused solely on the Ion competition, and then switched back after it ended on tweet competition. I started really early on the tweet competition, so I had some time to pause it, and also maybe it was an advantage. I regained some motivation for it, but I put it basically on pause. As I said, I think it's best to focus on one, maximum two competitions. Even though if you have something that you can easily automate, like change a few parameters, run it, I personally start thinking about it and it twists with my head, and I cannot fully let go of it.
You become obsessed with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's very obsessed. It's an obsession and addiction even a little bit. Then so it might make sense to focus on one, at maximum two competitions, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. So you balanced your slight shake-up in the other competition with this one by moving up 2 positions in this one. Any secrets to trusting your CV? Any other secret recipes to your CV for this competition?
Well, trust your CV and blend a lot. Blend as much as possible, usually is my answer. It makes your solution more robust, even though if the public leaderboard is not the highest. I think again in tweet I managed to, I make it kind of a goal to manage to select at least top 3 of private leaderboard of all my submissions. I think I managed to select second or even the highest one in this one. In Ion competition, we even selected the highest one. In Jigsaw, I didn't. That's why I dropped, but it was on purpose, as we discussed. If I would have selected the other one, it would have been also the highest one. So I think that's very important, that you learn to select the most robust ones and the ones that are on average the highest in private LP. Public LP doesn't count in the end.
Yeah. That's great advice. You already mentioned your solution a bit. If you could just summarize it very quickly, what made it to the final solution, and a very quick overview of it.
Yeah, as I said, do this tokenization, fit a lot of models. The final solution, final submission for tweet competition is really a blend of many different models. Can be even 50, 100 models. A lot of people blended a lot of models in this competition, because fitting was also very cheap. So yeah, I decided the last couple of days just to blend as much as possible and then select that. That's basically the final solution. Otherwise, I have few diversities in those individual models. It's kind of it's a tenfold mostly. It's the diversity is mostly coming from the randomness in the data. So that already gives you quite nice diversity, good and bad, that you have that. And otherwise, mostly the same thing, similar tokenization, maybe some differences in what data to use. I sometimes only took positive and negative data instead of the whole data, because neutral was way easier to predict because it was mostly the full text. So you could already get nearly top score, but just always selecting the full text on neutral. I had separate models in the end for neutral data, just optimizing on neutral. It gave me maybe 1 point, which is already quite helpful in this competition. So I blended only neutral models and then blended all the other models for positive and negative. And that's the final solution in the end.
Got it. So my final question usually in the interviews is best advice for beginners. I've already asked you that twice. I won't bore you with that. But speaking about your journey, you are now a dual Grandmaster. You have a palindrome-ish Kaggle profile where you can see 4 on both ends. What's next for you? Are you looking at other categories? Will you keep competing more? Any plans that you'd like to share?
I always need some kind of goal to keep me motivated. I have not decided on the next goal. Okay. I don't think the other categories are my goal. Maybe at some point I wanna do kernels, but not at this point. So I will try to share some stuff, but it's definitely not a goal, and definitely not data sets. Competing is what's fun to me, what interests me. The only other goal I can have now is higher rank. I have not made my mind now. Maybe rank 3 for now. I won't manage to get rank 3 after Jigsaw is medaled. It will be close. So maybe that's the next goal, but it's not too important to me at this point. So maybe the goal is to have fun, maybe more fun again that I had in the last couple of months. It can be a bit, if you work towards a goal, like my Grandmaster title, it can be a bit challenging for yourself. So maybe try to find competition. Maybe my goal is to figure out which competitions are really fun, because this is very difficult when you start a competition, and maybe even ditch a competition if it's not fun. Usually I keep going because I have kind of this obsession, as we said earlier, but learn new things, have fun. Maybe that's a good goal to have.
You've already achieved everything that there was to achieve on Kaggle. Now you'll just have fun with the competition.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay. Philipp, thank you so much again for joining me on the podcast for the third time, and again for your time.
Thank you, Sanyam.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review, or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.